Hi everybody, I'm hoping this is going to work. The PowerPoint seems to be really weird today in trying to run this slideshow. But here it is on Will Rogers. Actually, it's not Will Rogers, it's William Rogers. And he is a management theorist that is kind of in the middle of the scale between control and influence. I think he's called an interactionalist. And his theory is about decisive discipline. So let's get started. So it was kind of funny because I said Will Rogers in the beginning, but really um, his name is William Rogers and he's from Australia. But I did look up some quote from Will Rogers, our American born comedian from the turn of the century, who had a couple relevant things to say with classroom management. And one was, good judgment comes from experience, and a lot of that comes from bad judgment. And then also, don't let yesterday use up too much of today. And actually, I think William Rogers, the Australian-born management theorist, would agree with both of those statements. And so we'll keep going. One of the things with William Rogers and his views on classroom management deal with what's called the emotional climate. And he stresses a lot the use of language and says teachers have to use a language of discipline and do so under emotional pressure day after day. We all know how trying it can be when students are misbehaving and the kind of energy that it takes to kind of manage that with a whole classroom of other students. And so he says that it does matter what we say, how we say it, and when we say it. And he does believe that. The answer is yes. The more decisive, assertive, and positive our language is, the better to enable students to own their behavior and respect the rights of others. That's a really huge point that he makes. So there is language associated with decisive discipline, and he's a big proponent that the language is planned and conscious, and the emphasis of the language is assertive. And so much like what we heard in our presentations this last week, is this range of teachers, right? So indecisive, hostile, and decisive are the words that he uses. Indecisive teachers hope for compliance, but rarely receive it. These are the teachers who are often tested by their students and may end up screaming or pleading with the students to behave. Hostile teachers issue demands. They use put-downs and expect the worst from their students and often get it. They are the people who want to control the behavior of their students. Rogers talks about decisive teachers as expecting compliance. They don't demand it from students. It's just an expectation. They also recognize they cannot make students do anything. Their language is brief, clear, and direct. It's focused on the rule. Decisive teachers remain calm and businesslike, and then assertive when the situation demands it. That's the other piece that distinguishes decisive teachers from indecisive or hostile teachers. Rogers actually is using language as the tool for management. And what he suggests is the least to most intrusive types of language. And the level of teacher intrusiveness, how much a teacher gets involved with that student, should align with the level of the student disruption. Is it low, medium, or high? I mean, that's all using your judgment to determine what your response is to the student. And so Rogers identified 4 increasing levels of decisive teacher action. Step 1. Tactical ignoring is the first action. You need to let the student know you are aware of what they're doing, but you don't acknowledge it verbally. And that's kind of that teacher look type of a thing. And so you have to then determine how long can you ignore that behavior before taking further action, which is step 2. Step 2 is using directional language and addresses the behavior you want to see. So you either restate a rule or use this directional language such as, I want you to face this way. Thanks. And you would address the student by name. Thanks is used as a stated expectation, not a plea. You don't say, please, I really need you to face this way. Okay, it's in how you say it. Dave, I'd like you to turn around and face this way. Thank you. You do not then engage in negotiation or reasoning. You just state your direction. A lot of time a student is going to say, but I was telling him about that. Okay, thank you. But I would like you to turn around. So sometimes using the when/then or after/when or yes/when is better than engaging in this, well, I don't want you to do that right now. So say for example, the student comes at the beginning of your class and says, hey, I need to go to the bathroom. So one thing you could say is, yes, when I finish with this part of the lesson. So it's kind of better than saying, no, you can't, I'm teaching, or why do you want to go now? It's not rationalizing it or asking for any reason. You're giving the direction, and that's that. Step 3, the calm yet firm repeating of step 2. And what this is basically doing is giving them one more chance, and then you give the student a choice. And you don't want to get trapped by the reasons for why they're not following the rules. Rogers calls that secondary behavior. You want to keep your focus on the primary behavior that was the issue of your directive statement. So, for example, when Melissa is directed to stop talking to a classmate, turn around and face front. She responds by saying, I was just showing him how to solve the assignment. Why are you picking on me? This is the student's effort, conscious or not, to divert the teacher's attention away from the primary behavior, talking while the teacher is presenting a lesson. You could let it get your goat and arouse your emotions because her behavior really annoys you. But perhaps you even would like to slap her in the face. Well, that seems kind of extreme. I'm reading this little section out of a case study. That seems a little extreme. But what you need to do is you realize that her hostility is out of proportion to what you've asked her to do. Stick to your decisive plan. You redirect her behavior by first dignifying it. Dignifying a secondary behavior simply acknowledges that it may be true. It doesn't condone it. Your response would be, that may be the case, Melissa, but I want you to stop talking, turn around, and pay attention to the lesson. If those redirective statements haven't worked after 3 times, they're not going to work. And that's when you need to go to step 4. You give the student has been given their choice, right? Either fair rules or face the consequences of their choice. And if that's the case, then you follow that choice, that if they choose not to align with what the expected behavior is, you align that choice with either an in-room timeout, isolate them within the room, or if so severe, have them exit the room and go to a prearranged place that you've already kind of set up. Rogers doesn't see these as punishments, but rather as kind of a cool-off time for students to reflect on their behavior and come up with solutions to the problems. So these are also things that teachers could start overusing, and that's also discouraged as well. So, but you just give the student time alone, out of the context of the classroom or out of the context of the lesson, to kind of cool down and maybe choose something better. Again, the tone of your language is really, really important. 60% of what we say is how we say it. And so take this for example. If I said to a student, Paula, what are you doing? Nothing. Actually, you're out of your seat. What are you supposed to be doing? Well, I wasn't the only one out of my seat. Maybe you weren't, but I'm speaking to you. What are you supposed to be doing? My work. What does that say to the student with a sarcastic tone? Those are the kinds of things that make students hostile and aggressive and make you hostile and aggressive and pointing these fingers at students. Okay, so think of it this way. So that would be the example of a hostile teacher. What if we heard it this way? Paula, what are you doing? Actually, you're out of your seat. What are you supposed to be doing? Maybe you were helping somebody, but I'm speaking to you. What are you supposed to be doing? That pleading tone also makes you an indecisive teacher. Those are not the ways to be talking to students to get to your ultimate goal of being on task and having on-task behavior. So be thinking about how you speak to students and what your tone says about what your expectations are. So how do you get there? Rogers talked a bit about the establishing phase and emphasizing the 3 R's in the classroom: rules, rights, and responsibilities. And so one of the things he was very adamant about is that the rules should be perceived as fair and perhaps even negotiated as far as how students are involved in making the rules. And he also believed that all the rules should be clear and positively stated, few in number, and logical, with a cause and effect relationship. So the students have to own the rules that are applied in the classroom. And they need to be taught and retaught. Another piece of what he believed is respect as being that 4th R, that all teachers need to be respecting their students. So he advocates strongly about saying please and thank you in ways that help you keep calm and state your expectations to students. And so he was also very much against publicly shaming students and trying to treat them as fairly as possible and as equally as possible, even if it ends up you may not like a student very much. And we all kind of have that every once in a while, that student who gets under our skin. So, why do some of these things from Rogers sound familiar? Well, they may become more familiar next week when we talk about Dreikers and Glasser. These people are kind of along the same continuum as each other as far as how they're approaching behavior in school, and they're called interactionalist. And so Rogers and Dreikers favor logical consequences. They also like to talk about attention seeking and a need to belong as motives for misbehavior, so they're aligned that way. Rogers also expands on Glasser's contrast between boss and leader, believing that teachers should be more of a leader in the classroom rather than acting as a boss. And so, do you like Rogers' ideas? He has a book called Making a Discipline Plan that was published in 1989. It could probably be found on Amazon or online in some format if you take a look. But it's a comprehensive plan that really is addressing the students as being partners in the classroom. So I've put up a discussion board in Blackboard on Rogers. Do you like his ideas? What are some of the comments you have about this brief presentation? Thanks!